Okay. Yeah, no, we might as well get her going. So, okay. Okay, so we'll call our meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. It kind of looks like a firing squad from where I'm sitting here. I don't know what it looks like on that side looking this way, but anyways, certainly see how things go tonight at this special meeting. So just before we get into our full meeting here tonight, our special meeting, we'll take time for a moment of reflection. Hey, thank you. All right, so we'll just call this meeting to order. And the first item on the agenda is the acceptance of the agenda as it was sent out, I believe, last Friday. Do we have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda? So moved by Councillor Vink and seconded by Councillor Phelps. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. And does anybody have a conflict of interest with anything on the agenda? Probably we won't get that entailed tonight, but if you do find that you're in a little bit of a conflict, you can always declare it as the meeting goes on. So I'm going to turn this part of the meeting now over to our budget chair, Deputy Mayor Trnkowski. So Dean, you can take it away.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Welcome, councillors and staff and members of the public to this special our regular council agenda. We're dealing with the operations budget this evening. So to start things off, I will turn the floor over to our CAO, Greg Borda, for some opening remarks. And I guess I should point out, if there are any questions at any point during the meeting, council should ask those questions during that segment of the presentation rather than holding it over till later. So there will be an opportunity in each segment to ask questions of staff. So without further delay, I'll turn the floor over to CAO Borda.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just had a couple of opening remarks, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass things over to Wendy McMurray and the staff team. We have and it's on your desks, we have a PowerPoint presentation that we're going to be, that Wendy and the staff team are going to be providing. But I just wanted to make a couple comments about what we spoke about at the last meeting, and then what you're going to see and hear this evening. So we talked a little bit about some concepts in that and process in that last meeting. We talked about us establishing a base budget for, using 2023 and the values from 2023 to determine what we figure is our base for delivering this level of services. So you're going to see that here tonight. We also spoke in the last meeting to talk about determining what our supplementary budget requirements and requests are going to be. You're going to see those in specific detail about what the difference is between the base and how much we will be dealing with related to the operating budget. So I understand that this is a bit of a different approach to this, to your budget and to this council. But we're starting with operations first, and then we'll go to capital for the January meeting. So the primary piece of our conversation today is going to be dealing with our operating budget. We're going to look at things like examination of our fees and revenues coming in. You're going to see the specifics we sort of introduced you to in the last meeting, what I refer to as and what we refer to as the Big Seven. All right, so you're going to see the specifics in that list about what is the value of the changes from a supplementary perspective for things like salaries and OPP and those types of things. You're going to also see, we just received our new assessment roll for 2024. We got it on the 1st of December. You're going to see what our proposed new revenue is coming in for assessment for 2024 as far as our new revenue on tax assessment. We're going to have a bit of another little bit more of an in-depth conversation, and you're going to see a report related to the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund and what our suggested approach is going to be. We're going to, you're also going to be advised, as we had talked about it, we fund a good primary amount of our capital through a large transfer of funds from our tax levy. So last year that transfer was over $700,000. There's going to be a value you're going to see this evening, which is a little bit less than that for where we are currently based on our budget approach and what our estimates are. And then there'll be a more detailed conversation in January about how do you fund that capital budget. So you're going to have levy, you will have things related to government grants. So there may be gas tax funding, maybe those sort of types of things, development charge revenue as well. So throughout this particular conversation, you'll get a really good sense of what the discretionary and non-discretionary dollars are going to be specifically related. So we'll be talking, and you've seen in the report section how much is going to OPP and how much is going to those other agencies that are outside of council's purview. And then so what we'll do is we'll do this PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to hand it back over to Wendy, and as we walk through the draft operating budget, you'll see what we've done is we have separated our operating budget on what we on what we have to provide the province as far as our FIR reporting. So you'll see, and we'll be identifying things like how much is general government, how much is protective services. Those particular categories are set by the provincial government, and so we will be reporting out on how much we spend, or proposing that we spend in each of those particular categories. And so there is some method to the madness there about why we've chosen those particular categories, because they come out of our financial information report that we have to provide to the province. So I'm going to turn it over to Wendy and the team, the staff. They've worked very, very hard, this particular group here, that you see before you, debating and having conversations about their individual operating budgets. And I certainly have to congratulate Wendy and the Treasury team and all of the senior managers here, because they've spent hours and hours and hours over the last couple of weeks to prepare to get to where we are. So congratulations, folks. And Wendy, it's all yours.
There we go. Okay, so we're just going to run through the PowerPoint, and basically we're set up here as a panel, and we're going to go through each of the slide decks and just kind of transfer the microphone back and forth to present the slides, and then we'll go through the reports after the PowerPoint presentation. So we wanted to give you this slide first. So we saw something very similar the last time we met over the supplementary budget changes. And so right now, currently our draft operating expenses are just over $17 million. And we've been able to isolate the supplementary changes in the following categories. So salaries and benefits, and again, there's a report that kind of breaks down the $785,000 difference. OPP is 77,000, library is 62,000, conservation authority is 60, insurance is 48. Those are all increase in expenses. And then we have OMPF, which is revenue. We saw an increase, which is good for us, of 8,900. And then there's a report that talks about our assessment revenue increase, and that has gone up by 289,000. Corporately, we looked at the fuel and decreased it by 47,000. And then we have this other, which kind of incorporates all the other departments, everything else, and that comes to 79,000. So the supplementary changes from last year to this year equals $768,599. And that pretty much sums up where where all the changes are. So we're just going to go through the slide decks and kind of present each department. But that's at a high level for you guys. And we'll circle back to this slide at the end. So under general government, we have seen some increase in the revenue, and we'll talk more about when we get to the report how we came up with that number. But we're seeing an increase of 289,000 in the revenue. So that's the positive. And council, I'm going to tag that off to Dan.
Thanks, Wendy. So for the council budget, we're really just seeing a cost increase related to COLA. There was a decrease from 2023 related to the bus tour, so we're no longer budgeting that for 2024.
And then general government, which includes the CAO's department, finance department, and clerk's department. So in here, we brought in the increase to OMPF. We have seen an increase in the interest. So with the rates being the way they are, the money in our bank is generating us more income. So we've increased our interest allocation. And then on the expense side, we saw an increase in salaries and wages as well. Software licensing, conferences, insurance. Here's where that 100,000 in transfer for the OMPF to a reserve, and we'll talk about that strategy farther along in the report. And there has been a reduction in contracted services and telephone. So the base budget started at 63, and we increased it $191,000. There's a few one-time expenses under general government, being the asset management plan at 10,000, website training at 2.5, and file cleanup at 1,600. So it gives you the total base then would be 268,000. So change in that budget is $127,000. And for services.
Deputy Mayor Trentowski. Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I was just, so the annualization number there is positive interest, negative transfer out of there to, so it's a net of 191 positive there, or 191 negative?
So increase in expenses of 191,000.
And okay, and if I follow up that, so could you break out for us how much interest was net into that annualization, and then what the rest was the decrease?
Oh.
Please, thank you.
Yep. So interest went from, so last year we budgeted $328,000 in interest. And so we're seeing, excuse me, we're up to 452 right now. But a lot of that is also our loan guarantee that we had with Ritz. So that loan interest isn't going to stay the high as the actuals of this year. But we budgeted based on 32,000 a month. And so we're expecting to get 384,000 in interest. So that's so an increase of 56,000. And then wait, that's good. Okay.
Okay, for protective services police budget, as you'll see here, the annualization of the main cost is just coming from the contract increase with the OPP. I'll note the service level change is we're anticipating the Community Safety and Policing Act I guess, getting royal assent and coming into force this year. So we're expecting some startup costs with our new joint comprehensive board, but we're speculating at this time.
Thank you. the annualization, it's a reduction, and that's based on actuals from the 2023 budget. The biggest increase, obviously, the one time for the training for firefighters. So we currently have 5 firefighters participating in a NFPA 1001 recruit course, which involves about 300 hours of them doing their theory, quizzes, testing, reading online. So at the end of it, if they're successful in the course, we will then pay them out based on their time. So that's where the $28,000 comes from as a one-time, and then the remainder is just for some small items, radio batteries, things like that. Bottom line is an increase in the budget of just over $6,300.
So for conservation authorities, we're looking at a small year over year, relatively small compared to what we we're thinking year over year budget change. We'll can note that the big one-time driving factor is in upper Thames category 1 costs. As well, what's helping is the one-time reversal of the reserve contribution. We can explore that a little bit further because we do have a report on the agenda tonight to dive into this topic in more detail and break this report out. But this is overall how it's looking at high level. Sorry, you're quick on the clicker. But for bylaw, just our annual contract increase. Otherwise, we are holding that department at status quo, and we're in that contract until the end of till January 2025.
Building services with our updated fees and our schedule in our bylaw, we're anticipating an increase in revenue to cover the cost of operating.
Animal control, again, this is a status quo budget. We've just had the Humane Society and Giving Council their presentations on their contract and contract increases. So we've entered into a new contract with them through to December 31st, 2028. Otherwise, there's no changes in that budget. Emergency services. We also have a status quo budget, no increase. We have $4,000 in there in case of emergency operation center supplies, only if needed. Health and safety, it's basically an if needed budget for general, and then no changes from the previous year.
On the roads department, the base has actually decreased because of the additional grant and funding and projects were removed. So the annualization then, of course, looks a lot higher. That's just because of the reallocation of all those funds. The major increase in my department this year, of course, is the cost of living. My department represents 25% of the salary and wages. And also the gravel resurfacing costs, our contract is expiring, our 3-year term. As we are well aware of, we tendered a couple of years ago with an option 4 and 5, and those prices were extremely high. Hopefully the market is now stabilized and fuel has also come down, so maybe we'll get better prices in the spring for that. But those are the major additional costs. We've also decreased our fuel, and we've also decreased our winter maintenance just because our 3-year average over winter maintenance, we just haven't been getting the steady snowfalls like we used to get in the past. However, the one-off events are a major headache for us. That's it. Fleet, as I mentioned before, we've reduced our fuel costs, and that is primarily because we've also decreased our capital cost projects from the last year. So we're not going out there shouldering, graveling, and doing as many laneways as in the past because we used to do 16 kilometers of resurfacing asphalt a year. our gravel pits and shops, we've received a substantial increase in the insurance for our gravel pits. And based on the gravel and the capital works that are approved, we may need an additional 15,000 metric ton to replenish our stockpile of granular A. Right now, we have around 7,900 metric tons. If we keep to the status quo of the capital that we did last year, we shouldn't need any replenishing of the gravel, but it all depends on how the capital budget works out in January.
For Mitchell Transit, we're into a new contract with the operator through to December 31st, 2026. Previously, it was $12,000 annual contribution from the municipality. In 2023, that number was increased to 15, and that's the number you're seeing here today for 2024.
And streetlights, that's area rated, and so it's the slide looks a little different than the other ones. We just wanted to show the user fees and the operations, and the levy impact is just the principal loan payment.
Wastewater, we always annually adjust our user rates and fees. So we have adjusted those, so we have more money anticipated coming in. We also, our major thing that we did for this department this year is we adjusted the maintenance and capital. So a lot of some of the capital components were in our maintenance and operating costs. So we'll be moving those to capital. So you'll be seeing those projects in January. For water, also we adjusted our water rates. We will be doing a financial study again late next year to look at those for another 5-year term. And once again, we also reallocated a lot of the capital costs that were in maintenance and moving them to their proper spot. And solid waste, we have a one-time reduction, and this is because of new legislation that is coming out at the beginning of the second quarter of this year, and that is a producer pay program. So all the producers of materials are now to pay and subsidize recycling across Ontario. So in the springtime, you'll be receiving a presentation from Francis Villeneuve from Blue Water Recycling and Association. And we will be looking, or he'll be suggesting to you that we also investigate going to a third stream recycling process, which is the green waste stream, which will then also could be used, those funds could be used for it, and then also increase the life expectancy of our current Mitchell domestic landfill and be proactive.
For cemeteries, we're looking at a small decrease as we've moved in 2023 to a new grass keeping contract. We're just budgeting closer to actuals now based on that contract. We have one-time budget included as well. This past year, we did a monument repairs on Royce Cemetery. This year, we hope to do Staffa Cemetery, and we have budget for emergency ground repair, which could be runoff, grave collapses, etc. Yep.
And Recreation Culture Services Arena, mostly just an annualization change that's directly linked to COLA. And then there is a one-time out of the reversal of the kitchen remodel for 2023. And for parks, so this is all the parks in one. You will see a negative due to the Ketterson Pavilion being removed and the removal of grants. One thing you'll hear in a couple of these is we are not going to budget for this Canada Summer Jobs Grant like we have in the past. Going back from 2019, we were always successful. We were very successful in 2020, very successful in 2021, and very successful in 2022. However, we were not very successful in 2023. We budgeted 36,000 in Canada Summer Grants and were successful for 4,000. So that really affected the budget. So this year we're not budgeting for any. We have applied. We applied last week for our normal amount, but we are not, just due to the fact that we don't know, we're not going to budget for it. So that does affect. One-time additional cameras installed for Lions Park. The total budget being 346, and you'll see a budget negative of 263. Recreation program is basically an annualization of less, just due to the fact that we are upping our revenue. Our day camp has done really well. It's sold out time a couple of years in a row, so we are now budgeting for that amount, and that just drops the amount needed, $15,000 and a total of $17,000. And pool, the annualization is a lot in wages and benefits. This as well as restructuring the staff. As you've seen, the arena didn't have a very big hit because they were getting charged with a lot of wages that maybe weren't allocated in the right spot. So now places like the pool are seeing that as we're starting to collect the data from the timesheets. So a lot of the wages did get moved over here, as well as this department's heavily affected by the Canada Summer Jobs Grant, the no budgeting, and we're seeing increase. The pool chemicals, the chlorine alone was up 145% last year from what we normally pay. And even the utilities and gas is just seeing an increase. So we are seeing an increase in a lot of utilities throughout the facilities. Recreation facilities, the removal of the capital projects, the Dublin Hall washrooms mainly. And then also the removal of the transfer from reserve for the Dublin Hall washrooms, because we did budget for them in the previous year and brought it back as a revenue. So other than that, the budget stays fairly close. And I think library is Rosemary.
Thank you. Regarding the annualization numbers, these are essentially salaries. So we're looking at the step increases in COLA. For legislated, there is a decrease for interlibrary loans. This is because the library is charged book rate, not standard postage rates for materials that are transferred in and out of the province and among other libraries within the province. And service level changes include collection materials and delivery costs for the PCIN, so the transfer of materials that we see throughout the libraries in Perth County. Cyber insurance is new for us. Ordinarily, that had been covered by the Stratford Public Library because Stratford oversees the library's IT. So they were covering the cyber insurance. That will no longer be the case beginning in 2024. So we're seeing it in our budget as opposed to theirs. And that results in an increase of just over $62,000 for the library.
And other facilities do see an annualization of facility staff wages more accurately captured, and as well as an increase in insurance utilities. That'll be the two effect. The only other thing I would mention, because I don't know that I have any more, is that you will see a lot of these not increase much because we did take capital projects out, and you'll see those come into the capital budget in January. So this is just the operating.
Thanks. So for the planning department, they're showing an increase. Ultimately, it's a budget closer to actuals this year from revenue side, as well as a shortfall on collection of the DCs as we work through that process, phase them in. I would just note that planning has also reviewed their fees, and we're operating on new fees from Perth County in 2024. Economic development, basically a status quo budget. So this would include the ECDEV mixer, the newsletter, as well as legal and consulting costs attributed to West Perth land development assets here on Industrial Park, for example. Oh, heritage and culture. Just a small annualization here for the Music in the Park and Public Art Program is a project they're hoping to run in 2024. Otherwise, it is a budget decrease. I'm sorry, I will have to look why that is so low. but no one's got a hand, so maybe I'll move on and report that back to council. So community grants. So this budget includes our Ritz Villa contribution until the end of 2024, as well as the community grant request portion. The budget in here is inclusive of all of the requests from the community. So at this point, we are hoping to have some direction or conversation from council tonight about if that budget should be inclusive of all those requests or not. Really, we're looking for council to set a number, and then we will report back to council on how we think those grants should be allocated throughout the community.
So I can answer the discrepancy in this one. It is the Mitchell 150 one-time expense in there that's been removed. And so that's why there's a decrease in the year-to-year budget.
So for the BIA, for their budget, it is a self-funded department. They are looking at budgeting closer to actuals this year, as well as they're looking at a reserve from transfers this year to support an Experience Ontario grant application for their downtown street party in connection with Mitchell 150. And we've just provided that we anticipate that reserve to be approximately 26,000 at year end. It's hard to tell because that depends on the BIA bucks and how much are sold through the remainder of the year. Drains, this is for our drainage superintendent. No change in this budget.
And then other cash requirements, these are, so the annualization is the temporary construction loan coming off because we've paid for this building. And then the 406,000 is our principal debt payment, and we have a report dealing with debt later on. So there's just a small change there of 11,000.
Deputy Mayor Trentesky, I was wondering back to drains a second. So is the drainage work that's done in the municipality on the roads each time a drain is completed, is that done then in capital, not in operating? Or in a different spot in the operating budget?
So this drain one is specifically to the drainage superintendent's fees. But then there is drainage that's under transportation. And so if you want to know specifically if that one was changed, it's not highlighted. 1 second.
Maybe under roads, or I don't see a transportation.
Yeah, it's under roads, sorry. So it was budgeted in 2023 as 155,000. We reduced it by 50,000. So essentially we took all the requests and all the engineers reports that we have, and we've kind of documented how much is committed for West Perth roads, and we felt comfortable reducing it by 50,000. So it's at 105. So I think I could leave this slide up and talk about what's next, and then jump into the reports. So essentially, this is the capital or the operating portion of the budget. Next will be the capital portion, which will be in January the 15th. And we hope to bring all our capital requests at that meeting. I'd like to bring the 10-year capital plan that we've been working on, and also some examples of life cycle budgeting for you. January 29th has been the tentative date to set for West Perth levy. And then we'll work on, once we get the school board information and Perth County levy, we'll bring that forward once we have it. So that is the end of the presentation.
Okay, Councillor Foster, you have a question?
When will we get county and the school board levy numbers? Do we have an idea generally when that happens? Because I think last year was March for county, wasn't it?
Yeah, typically March is for both, like, last year we didn't see any change in the education rate, so it was pretty easy. It was just a letter. I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything. The county, they're working on their budget currently. I would think it would be before March, but just because they've advanced their timeline as well.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, we're not advocating that we would wait, so we could pass our municipal budget bylaw by the end of January and then add and pass the comprehensive bylaw, which includes the school board and with the county in March.
Any further questions from anyone at this time? Okay, Councillor Fournier, go ahead.
Through your worship, I was just wondering, I had a couple of questions about the OPP report that was included in the agenda that we were given. Who would I ask those questions of? Do I just direct emails to somebody on the police services board?
I think we're going to get into the OPP later on in section 4 of the reports. So when we get to that section, the questions can be brought forward at that time. Seeing nothing further, we'll move into section 4 reports and 4.1 municipal budgeting 101, and Monique Jean, our deputy treasurer, will or Wendy, whichever. Monique's name is at the top, but she takes the credit for the report. But Wendy, go ahead.
Yes, Monique wrote the report and I wanted to make sure she got credit for it. If there was any questions, it was basically outlines kind of how the municipal budget comes together. And it was just more for education purposes, the report. So if there's any questions, gladly take them. Do we want to pass the resolutions as we go on these ones? Just to kind of.
Yeah, so we have, if there's no more questions or no discussion, then we have a recommendation that the council of the municipality of West Perth receive the municipal budgeting 101 information report. So I'll look for a mover, Councillor Bank, seconder, Councillor Chessel. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. Those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Okay. Section 4.2 budget reporting format, or budget format report.
So that report is, again, for information purposes. It kind of breaks down what departments are in each FIR grouping to help kind of summarize when reading the report, kind of what would be in what bucket. If there's any questions on that, gladly take them.
Any questions for Wendy on that? Don't see any, so we have a recommendation that the council of the municipality of West Perth receive the budget format information report as presented. Councillor Phelps, seconder, Councillor Rose. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. Okay, we'll move to 4.3, 2024 Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund allocation.
So this report kind of goes into a bit of the historical funding that we've seen, and then kind of the cutbacks that we've kind of moved over to the levy. And so basically gives you a 10-year picture on that. And then also there's a graph in there that kind of displays the change between what's been levy and what's been the grant. And you can see the levy going up and the grant going down in that graph. And then there was talk at the beginning, kind of our strategy on the OMPF and our dependency on the grant, and moving some of the levy so that we're not dependent on this grant. So in the report, we talk about moving $100,000, kind of set up a reserve for this so that we can start the transition. We weren't as aggressive this year as maybe we would like to be in coming years. We'd like to kind of look at a 5+ year strategy to move the OMPF off the operating. But it is $1 million, so we wanted to kind of put our toe in the water and test the waters and start with 100,000. So that's what staff has put forward in this report. So if there's any questions.
Councillor Foster, go ahead, please.
So this is in anticipation of in the next 10 year, the province will probably gut it entirely, is the idea? We don't, we only
I
can
don't
guess at
have
what
the
they're going to
crystal ball
do.
for that. It is designed for rural and northern municipalities, so only 390 municipalities receive this funding. Not all municipalities in Ontario receive it. There's a lot of funding formula and how this grant gets to be what it is. There's a lot of history with how this unconditional grant was formed. I'm not sure the direction of powers that be and where they're going to take this grant, but because we've seen drastic cuts and the impacts that it's had on West Perth, we just thought we'd put forward a strategy that would position us better if these cuts continue.
Thank you.
Councillor Vink, go ahead,
Yeah,
please.
thank you, Deputy Mayor Trentowski. Well, I would support this initiative, but maybe not at tonight's meeting. I tend to lean to defer this one maybe until one of our January meetings and not yet commit to that $100,000 going into reserves until we see what the capital budget looks like for 2024. So I'd lean to defer this recommendation to one of our January budget meetings.
Any further questions? What would staff have in reply to Councillor Vink's suggestion?
And we certainly can hold that part of the resolution till you see the capital, so you have comfort. We know it's a new initiative, and we've seen the cuts hurt West Perth, and so we're trying to make a strategy to help it. And so definitely can respect seeing it once you see the big picture. So yeah, we could move that the first two sentences and defer the third to January the 15th.
Or just don't read it.
Yeah, just don't read it.
Okay, so we would need a separate motion then to defer, or how do we proceed with that?
The motion on you're seeing is just a recommendation from staff. If Councillor Vink wants to make the first two as a motion, then you would just simply not read the third one. And if someone else wants to read it, that's a matter of council.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, I guess in support of what the clerk is saying, we could have council pass the first two pieces of the recommendation. But I think we would prefer if there is consideration that's going to be given that it be deferred. I think so it's on the record, so we know that this particular item has been deferred for council's future consideration. So maybe have two separate motions.
Okay, so I'm looking for someone to put forward a motion that the Council of the Municipality of West Perth accept the 2024 Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund OMPF report as information, and also that council be advised of an increase of OMPF funding for 2024 in the amount of $8,900 from a total of $982,600 to $991,500. So who will make that motion? Councillor Vink. Seconder, Councillor Duck. Okay, any further discussion or comments on this motion as presented? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. Those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Okay. So now the second part of this, that council defer a decision to direct $100,000 OMPF funding to reserves to start the initial strategy to remove the reliance on OMPF funding on the operating budget and defer it until such time when we have further budget deliberations connected to the capital budget discussions to be held in January. So Councillor Vink, you're willing to make that a motion. Seconder, Councillor Harold. Any discussion on that item? Councillor Rose, go ahead, please.
Just for clarity, that's not saying that that 100,000 is that we're going to put away is dead. We're just waiting for a few weeks to decide when we're doing it.
Yes, I believe that was Councillor Vink's intent. He's nodding his head. We're setting it aside. We're going to park it and we're going to put a note on the fridge to come back to it later when we have further discussion. And at that time, we will, as we said, that once we have the bigger picture, then we can decide how we want to proceed on that item. Any further questions or comments? Mayor McKenzie.
This back to more to Councillor Foster's question earlier in the meeting here. And Wendy, basically, and I don't know what happened this year, like with their formula, but traditionally we have been receiving 85% of what we got the previous year. And so, you know, whether they'll keep going 85% every year after year after year until there's nothing left to take 85% of, I don't know. But there's obviously something in their formula that has increased ours this year. And what it is, I'm not up to date on that. But as a rule, we have been decreased 85% a year. So you can almost tell now, if there was no tweaks to the formula, that next year, how much we're going to get.
There was so in 2023, we actually did see an increase as well. So it was $56,000 we received more in 2023. And then in 2024, we're receiving 8,900. So.
Mr. Chair, I believe that some of the changes is because of our increase in households that we have. So when they do their formula, because we have some additional households coming in into play and our assessment going up, that is in the formula. But to speak to the mayor's point, we anticipate that there's going to be a continuous reduction of 15% per year, right? So if we're looking at, if that's the case, and we're looking at $1 million, we're going to be seeing, you know, potentially over the course of about the next 6 years, that this will whittle away to nothing. And so we want to try and anticipate that. So we're doing revenue. We're going to make that particular adjustment and look at increasing some of our tax revenue to go into the operating budget, and as well, then any reductions would go into our reserves as far as any savings are concerned. So we're really concerned that we don't get hit with a 6 or 7 or 8 or 10% tax increase just because of OMPF. That's the purpose we talked about at the last meeting.
Anything further? I guess my only observation would match up with the CAO's comments in years previous, and some of the more senior members of council will remember that as OMPF contribution from the province was shrinking, West Perth was left to make up the deficit, and we would scratch our head from time to time figuring out how we would make up the difference. So that was more of a reactive stance, and now we're attempting to make a more proactive stance. So just an observation there. So we have a motion on the floor. There is a mover and a seconder. So any more questions or comments? If not, I will call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Okay, very good. We'll move into section 4.4, the 2024 assessment impact, please.
This report was kind of tricky to write. There's a lot of numbers moving around, and so I'm going to try my best to make it clear. By all means, ask questions if it's not. So in pulling our information from the roll, we had reduction in residential class. That reduction is more of a tax shift from residential to farm. So if we were to run our same levy ask of last year with our new assessment, we'd have to raise an additional $30,000. I think that's the first time I've seen kind of growth go that way, but it's because of the shift from residential to farm. And so residential went down roughly $27 million, but farm went up $44 million. So in that chart there, you can see kind of the reduction, 2.91 in residential. And we have been preparing in our budgets. Last year we had 50 properties that we know of that were in the wrong class. And so what we did is we budgeted for a write-off of $440,000. Because what happens is a farm property has that farm tax program that gives them 75% discount. So when you're talking a lot of money on taxes on residential, we can see a tax bill go out for 20,000, but really should only be paying 5. And so when that gets corrected, we have to give back the money. And so what's happened is we've seen a lot of the properties come out and into the right class. So in 2024, our review of what's left is 13 properties that we think potentially could be moved back into farm. So we've left a little bit of money still for write-offs. And I think that's how we're coming up with that $200,000 number, is the shifting of the 30,000 that we're short, the 440,000 that's coming off as a write-off. We're changing that number to 130. And then our supplementals, we've noticed an increase in them. We were conservative in adjusting that number, but we moved it up $10,000. So the net change of all of that is your $289,076. There's a lot of number changing there. So if there's any questions on the assessment growth, gladly take them.
Councillor Vink, go ahead, please.
Deputy Mayor Trentowski, could you just clarify that it was tax class changes and not property tax assessment by MPAC? Because aren't we still waiting for property tax assessment by MPAC? Because the provincial government finally came through on that and reevaluated the property taxes by class, and so is that all settled?
No, we're still on 2016 values.
Yeah, okay.
So that we haven't heard from the province yet when a reassessment is going to happen. So we're just kind of waiting to know. But this is those farm properties moving in West Perth from the residential class into the farm class where they belong. So what happens is it inflates our revenue because we're collecting 75% more than we should be. And so what we've done in the past is because we know that we have that many properties, we've budgeted for a high write-off. So this year, we know that we only have 13 properties. We reduced the write-off significantly. And that's where our growth number is coming from.
What, go ahead.
Yeah, so as Wendy had articulated it in 2023, we were faced with 50 potential farm properties. We know that MPAC has settled and through these particular farms that they have been reclassed. So are these properties that 37 of them have been reclassed to go to farm. So that leaves 13. So when we were budgeting for 50, we no longer require to budget the same level of write-off 50 when we're going to be reduced to 13. So that's the basis why we can reduce that write-off, take that particular value, which is assessment that's coming to us, and have it as a positive revenue assessment.
And I also like to say that MPAC has, they've taken kind of heard from municipalities in how the whole process with AgriCorp and MPAC makes it very unstable for us to rely on growth numbers and to rely on revenue generating and it be stable. So they've made some process changes to help provide stability in the role. So we shouldn't be seeing 50 properties in the wrong class going forward. So hopefully these changes will stabilize the role and stabilize our growth numbers, which means we can rely on the revenue that it will produce.
Go ahead, Mayor McKenzie.
So Wendy, and this is maybe a stupid question, but you're already aware of there's 13 properties that are probably assessed wrong. So can there not be any communications to the landowners that your property is probably assessed wrong and you should be correcting that?
We proactively send them letters. We don't have to. They already are getting a notification from AgriCorp and from MPAC. We send an additional letter stating that, you know, we believe their property is in the wrong, because we can tell, you know, it's just a, you know, change in ownership, whether it's siblings coming on to the ownership or estates or whatever, it jumps them out of the program. And so we can tell from just looking at the role that they used to have farm, now they're residential. So we'll send them a letter. And we highlight it in our newsletter as well to try and get farmers to correct it. But we can have 20 properties from the same farm that just sits there, and it's hard to see that level of number of farms sitting there.
So is there anything wrong with picking up the phone and talking to the owners and say, you know, like I know, and I'm not finding fault with what you're doing, don't get me wrong, but I know if they're not aware, if they get a piece of paper from the assessment office and that their property has been bumped from resident or from farm to residential, a letter maybe isn't going to have any more positive effect than what the original one did. I just, and the only reason I like I was involved in an assessment for a tax owner in West Perth, and I went to the, what do they call it, a hearing, and it was a case where this particular person wasn't actively farming the farm anymore. He rented it out, but it was still a farm, and he just, you know, had no idea, you know. And I'm just wondering if we had any better communications, if we could catch this any better than what we're doing.
Yeah, we can certainly try phoning them. The hard part is municipality can't do the paperwork. So it's still up to the landowner to fill out the paperwork, contact AgriCorp, and be in touch with MPAC. We have to bill according to the role, which makes it hard.
Councillor Foster, go ahead.
Once they get their assessment fixed, how many years do we owe them back taxes on?
No more than 3.
Thank you.
Yeah, so further to the mayor's question, I know Wendy, we try to be proactive. But as Wendy has said, is that the property owner, once we give them notification, they have to apply. And that application has to go through the process. And sometimes if there's been change, most of these have been change of ownership that we've been sort of dealing with. And it could be change of ownership amongst family members, but it can also be changes of ownership where there's an unsettled estate. And so it takes a couple of years for those particular processes to occur. So again, we try our best to facilitate those particular items. As Wendy said, her and her staff are very proactive to try to make sure that we contact. We have no obligation to, but we try to make sure we contact the property owners in this case. The second piece to this particular report, beyond the farm class item, is our increase in our supplementals. So when we just got our new assessment roll, and that's why we had sort of moved away from the December the 4th meeting. We just got this assessment roll on the 1st of December. So our staff have been doing the calculations about the new assessment here over the last week. And so we also get the benefit as MPAC works through new building permits. So those are for decks and structures and garages and those sort of types of things. We'll get our supplemental increase as well. And so there's a little bit of the supplemental increase in here in this particular piece. So it's a pretty, as Wendy said in her introduction, the report's a little complicated to try to work out those particular details. So we try to make sure that we're coming out and giving council what we feel is our best educated guess about where the assessment's going to fall for the full 2024 fiscal year.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Councillor Foster, go ahead, please.
Generally speaking, once MPAC gets the paperwork, how long do they take to process it?
I think it depends on the property. So farm, definitely their policy is to go on site, where in town or subdivision, they may use other means like aerial photos, GIS, that type of thing. But for farm properties, the policy is to go on site. But we have iCloud permitting, which is speeding up the process. So we have a service level agreement with MPAC, and we are meeting all of those, or they're meeting their deliverables on their role and assessment.
So for when it's zoned wrong or whatever, when it's getting billed as residential and agriculture, would that take about the same amount of time as when there's a building permit, or are those different speeds, or how does that work?
I would say that would be more of an MPAC question, kind of in how they process different zonings and building permits. We have asked Jeremy, our representative from MPAC, to come. So he's scheduled to come sometime in the new year. So sorry, I don't really have an answer to that.
Can you remind me in January when I forget my question?
Yeah.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, we have a recommendation that the Council of the Municipality of West Perth accepts the 2024 assessment impact report as information, and that council be advised of an increase in the taxation revenue of $289,076. Moved by Councillor Rose, seconder. Councillor Phelps, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, we're at 8:04 p.m. in our time. And before we jump into 4.5, I think it would be prudent to call a recess and reconvene at 8:15 p.m. Oh, do I need a motion? properly, so it's 8:14, so we will proceed to section 4.5, and that's the 2024 full-time equivalent reports. Wendy, go ahead, please.
So this is the second year we've been able to produce this report, because we're using a budgeting software to help us with our staffing. And so essentially all staff go in and kind of their rate of pay goes in, deductions go in, and out pops a number. So it's a big calculator for us. It saves a lot of time and it's organized for us. So essentially, the difference between last year and this year in salaries and benefits is the 785,374. That number is higher because we've restructured the fire department into salary plan. Last year, there needed to be account restructure. We couldn't quite move all their meetings into salary plan. So this year we have, so part of the increase is due to that. The other parts of that increase refer to COLA and the market check. Merit increases, so if someone gets a merit increases, they're not at job rate, so job rate's at the end of their grid, they're midway through, their merit increase comes into effect in different quarters. So that's been included in that 700,000. There's been two new positions would be the so last year the community engagement coordinator was only in their part of the year. This year they're in their full part of the year. And then also the coordinator, no, the facility attendant, it's been added in there as well. And then there's been the two positions in the fire department are now on payroll, and then a booth staff. So all of that to say our numbers went from 108 last year to 113. That is a head count. So that takes that many staff to run the municipality. The full-time equivalent number, that is take all of our hours, and that's how many full-time staff it requires to operate, and that number is 59.94. Farther down in the report, it kind of distributes our payroll, so you can see the departments where wages kind of fit. So again, the general administration takes a bulk of it, same with transportation. If there's any questions on that report, I'd gladly take them.
Any questions for Wendy on this report? Okay, seeing none, there is a recommendation that the Council of the Municipality of West Perth accept the 2024 full-time equivalent report as information, and that council be advised of an increase of salaries and benefits for 2024 in the amount of $785,374 from $5,077,191 to $5,862,565. Mover, Councillor Rose, seconder, Councillor Foster. Any further discussion, comments? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. Those in favor? And that's carried. Okay. Next, we have section 4.6, and that deals with the 2024 supplementary change for the Ontario Provincial Police.
So in this report, it gives you a little more context as to the change. In the report is also attached is the billing statement for you for review. And in there you can see how they calculate the number and how many households it represents, and different facts in that report. So overall, there was an increase of $77,167 in the contract. And then there was also a $7,000 increase to the Police Services Board due to the change in legislation. So, well, maybe not change in legislation. Maybe I'm saying it incorrect. Any questions?
Any questions for Wendy? I think Councillor Fournier, you had some questions earlier.
I did, thank you. Through your worship, it was just a simple question about the some of the numbers on the service billing summary. Particularly, I'm getting complaints from constituents about drug addicts in town, but I'm seeing that we only had 6 drug possession charges laid last in 2022. Service calls. Perhaps I'm not understanding the form correctly. If someone could explain what I'm reading better if I'm not reading it correctly. It seems like a very low number.
One from staff wish to reply to that?
I think you're interpreting it correctly. Whether it's a call, how the call comes in, I can't speak to how the call comes in, and how they code it, but I think you're reading that part correctly.
Anything further? Go ahead.
So, Mr. Chairman, so there will be a change that will happen, and Wendy has referred to this, and Dan's referred to it a little bit. I know, Councillor Harold, you've been dealing with this at the Police Services Board. So there will be a change in how policing is delivered amongst the OPP, and there'll be a change coming based on the change of regulation around the size and nature of police services boards and how they manage detachment areas. So 2024 is going to be a bit of a watershed year about that change. So we'll be able to bring forward some information around that. I was on a call this week. So these 2024 numbers, they anticipate that we'll be billed on a consistent basis on the way that we were for 2024. We anticipate that 2025 will most likely change based on the new model as far as and the size and nature of the Police Services Board, about how that's going to work. So there, that $7,000 that's placed in there is an anticipation for increased costs related to our involvement in the Police Services Board and the new Police Services Board. So as there's some clarity comes forward, because that's what we're waiting for, is some clarity from the ministry about how this board is going to look and operate and those things, then I think the representatives will be back to council. But we anticipate the majority of the change will happen in 2025 as far as financial and budget year is concerned.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Vink, go ahead, please.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Trentowski, then you said anticipate a couple times, and I'll use that question back to you. Are we anticipating then that the OPP cancel our contract sometime during 2024, or that cancellation will happen sometime in 2025?
It's true to Councillor Vink. I'm not certain that the word cancellation, they're going to change it. Okay, so I think the way that they are going to administer the contracts and administer billing is going to change, and so and that's yet to be determined, right? So our contract is our contract, and so we have that condition, and I'll refer to it as a condition that we have a contractual agreement with OPP. There may be there will be some changes about how that service is going to be delivered and how it's going to be administered for 2025. I think it's and those are unknowns to us at this particular time.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Seeing none, so we have a recommendation that the Council of the Municipality of West Perth accept the 2024 supplementary change for the OPP report as information, and that council be advised of an increase in the OPP contract in the amount of $77,167 from a total of $1,605,584 in 2023 to $1,682,751 in 2024 and the additional $7,000 for the Police Services Board budget. Looking for a mover. Councillor Harold, seconder. Councillor O'Donnell, any further discussion? If not, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Okay. Thank you. So we're on to section 4.7, supplementary change for Conservation Authority.
So West Perth contributes to 3 conservation authorities, Sauple Bayfield, Maitland Valley, and Upper Thames River. So the 3. We had budget numbers for 2, so they've been included. And then for the Maitland Valley, they're not passing or giving budget information until later. So staff increased it by 5%. For a total increase of $60,760. The biggest conservation authority that we contribute to is the Upper Thames. And so they broke down their costs into kind of operating costs of $95,090. And then there's this special benefiting, which essentially is the dams. So Mitchell Dam, Fullerton Dam, and then other benefiting dams. So in the report, it breaks down what the $130,451 makes up of those 3. So they have being the largest, they have the combined budget of $225,541. But our overall increase is $60,760, 2024.
Okay, thanks, Wendy. Questions, Councillor Rose, go ahead, please.
Could you clarify special benefiting of the Mitchell Dam? What exactly does that mean?
Do you want to go, Wendy, or I can answer? I'll let you go first and I'll chime in later.
So essentially, they manage the dam, but it is West Perth's dam. So Fullerton Dam and Mitchell Dam are the responsibility of West Perth, but the Conservation Authority manages it. So in doing some of those items, they're looking after capital items and they look after the grants for those capital projects. So the special benefiting is we have to pay for our dams, which is the Mitchell Dam and the Fullerton Dam. So any work is 50% if they can get grant. And then the other benefiting dam is for London.
Be Wildwood.
Wildwood.
Wildwood and Pittock in Woodstock. Go ahead, Councillor Rose.
So when they're saying benefiting, we pay X amount and then they're like, that's more than just maintenance, correct? That 122,000?
That's capital and maintenance. Like, as Wendy explained, the dam, those structures fall within our municipality entirely. And therefore, that's why we're assigned the full amount. Like, nobody in St. Mary's would benefit from these structures. So they have their flood wall.
I was just wondering what the 130,000, like what do they do for that? I know they maintenance, but that surely shouldn't take that much.
Well, it will be in the information that I provided to council in October. Those numbers are broken down in there.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Go ahead, Mayor McKenzie.
I'm like Murray, and I know why we're paying that. I'm just, if you could refresh, Dean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you know what repairs they're doing to the dam? There's some upkeep that have been put off for a year or two, and this is probably the year they're going to do it. The Fullerton Dam, I know they're talking about pulling it out, and that's the cost of taking that out there, as it doesn't really serve any useful purpose. So that's what that cost is. I'm just not sure what all the costs are for Mitchell.
There was, I remember correctly, the gates, work on the gates, and work on the Gabion basket flood wall downstream.
Yeah.
those are the two main items that I can remember off the top of my head. There are a couple other items as well.
I believe there's EA studies, that's what we paid for last year for the Fullerton. And so just cleanup of, that particular one is a 7,000. The 122 is, capital. It's a highly capital year for us, and it will be, in the next two, I believe. And then it kind of drops off. So there's some, we can pull that information and give it to you guys.
Councillor Fournier, or did you have anything further, Councillor Rose? No? Okay, Councillor Fournier.
Through your worship again. Just looking at the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority website, the UTRCA contracts the municipality of West Perth to undertake routine operation and maintenance of the dam based on protocols and direction provided by the UTRCA. Shouldn't we already know the answer to this question if we're contracted by them to spend money and do the thing?
The work on some parts of the work are delegated out to West Perth staff, like providing the physical labor, but there's that cost, but there's also the like the actual cost of materials and other things. Wendy, did you have something further for that?
They kind of schedule it when they can get a grant. So the grant is, I'm just going to give you the initials. I'm not sure what it stands for. WECI. And so they leverage that grant, and they manage that dam for us and that grant. And so as far as their work plan and schedules, they give us an idea. They're also bringing in asset management. So they're bringing in these structures into their asset management plan, and so kind of coordinating when they're going to do the work, etc. We'll be asking more questions for them regarding their asset management plan, especially on these two dams.
Go ahead, Clerk Hobson.
I was just gonna say it's the Water and Erosion Control Infrastructure Program.
And there's only $10 million of provincial funding for all the flood control structures in Ontario. That's why it's ambiguous as to know, as Wendy said, conservation authorities apply for the grants, but there's no clear way of knowing that the grant applications as requested will be successful. It's very, very speculative part of the process. Councillor Vink, go ahead.
Deputy Mayor Trentowski, it's always been a pet peeve of mine that the West Perth dam in Mitchell here is classified as a non-flood control device, and then essentially putting all of the burden on us. And correct me if I'm wrong, but if it was used as a flood control device, then the cost would be burdened over the entire watershed. And so that's why I think we see now when we have to do repairs on it, that it's burdened entirely by us. And also correct me if I'm wrong, earlier this fall, we were emptying out the dam, emptying out this recreation structure, but we got a rain, so we had to close the gates so that it didn't flood downstream. We used it all of a sudden as a flood control device for the rest of the watershed, and so you can't have it both ways, closing it off when we're already in the process of emptying it, just because it rained.
That's Councillor Vink, that's duly noted, but I think we're getting into the semantics of whether it's a dam or it's a flow control structure. Like when you talk to the folks at the Conservation Authority, they refer to it as a flow control structure. So it may appear that it's holding back water to prevent a flood. It's more to do with regulating the flow, because we're at the top end of the watershed. It's about regulating enough flow, keeping enough flow in the river at all times so that it doesn't go dry. And if the flow went too low, Mike Kramer, our operations manager, will tell you that will impact the operations of the sewage treatment plant and the numbers that they have to produce to the Ministry of the Environment. So for as much as it appears that we're having to carry the ball unfairly, there is a reason for it. And that's that's the best way that the powers that be have figured out how to allocate these costs. So, but your concerns about the costs are duly noted, and I've raised those concerns as well at the board level. Councilor Rose?
Way back, say, whenever the dam was put in, it was put in to stop flooding farther downstream. Is that not correct?
That could be.
There's no
Councillor
way
Rose.
that in the 50s that Mitchell would have said, oh, we want something for aesthetics. I don't believe that crap for a minute.
Well, that goes back into the history, and I'm not fully conversant on the history, but I think you will find that the attitudes about dams and flood control has evolved significantly since the 1950s or 1940s when conservation authorities were first formed. So, but again, your point is duly noted. Any further questions or discussion? So Tracy Annette, the general manager, will be coming to address council, I believe, in the new year, January, if I'm not mistaken. And so if you have any questions like that, feel free to bring those up at that meeting as well. Okay, so if there's no further questions or discussion, then we have a recommendation that the council of the municipality of West Perth accept the 2024 supplementary change for the Conservation Authority's report as information, and that council be advised of an increase of municipal levy to the conservation authorities in the amount of $60,760 from $251,404 in 2023 to $312,164 in 2024. So mover, Councillor Duck, seconder, Councillor Rose. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the vote. Those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Okay, thank you. Moving to section 4.8, supplementary change for the library.
So on this report, I'm just gonna note there's a typo. The total increase on the report says 65,527, and the correct number is $62,027. So, so again, Rosemary kind of spoke to it during her presentation that a lot of the additional costs are due to wages and some legislative changes. And the cyber insurance. So if there's any other questions on the supplementary change for the library?
Looking around the room, I don't see anything. So if not, there's a recommendation that the council of the municipality of West Perth accept the 2024 supplementary change for library as information, and that council be advised of an increase of library operating budget in the amount of $65,527 from $350,976 in 2023 to $416,503 in 2024. Oh, Clerk Hobson.
Sorry, Chair, I'll just note that the sheet is incorrect, but the screen is correct. So just the values there were off.
Forgive me. So I'll read it off the screen. I'll just strike that and reread the recommendation that the council of the municipality of West Perth accept the 2024 supplementary change for library as information, and that the council be advised of an increase of library operating budget in the amount of $62,027 from $350,976 in 2023 to $413,003 in 2024. Thank you. So a mover and a seconder. Councillor Fournier, you move or? Oh, okay. I saw your hand up. So, okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry, perhaps I missed something here, but there's a $3,500 difference between the bottom of the page and the top. 413,003 in 2024 and 416,503 in 2024. Is that the decrease in legislative costs of 3,500? It's the right number.
There was a typo in the report.
Oh,
And so the number, everything that says 65,527 should read 62,027.
Thank you. Can I ask Rosemary what I should know this answer already, but what was the decreased in legislative costs? What do we no longer have to do?
I believe you're referring to the $3,500 decrease. That is because for the interlibrary loan, so that is the lending and borrowing of items outside of Perth County, so among libraries, mostly in Ontario, but it could be out of province as well. There is a reduction there because the library, for those items, the library doesn't pay standard postage. We pay book rate, which is lower than standard postage. So that's the difference between book rate and what we would pay for postage if we had to pay the full amount.
Okay, thanks Rosemary for that response. So I'm looking for a mover on the recommendation. Councillor Fournier, seconder Councillor Foster. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Oh, go ahead. Oh, it's just a stretch. Okay. Seeing no further discussion, call the vote. Those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Okay. Thank you. We'll move to 4.9 supplementary change for insurance.
So we only have a verbal number or a confirmation that the insurance has gone up 11%. So we applied that corporately. During 2023, we did get a extra charge for the new Ketterson Pavilion, 7,417. So that's why the numbers don't quite work. You have to add last year's premium plus the Ketterson, and then 11% was added to that total. The increase in insurance is $48,920. If there's any questions, I'll take them.
Any questions for Wendy? Councillor Foster, go ahead.
Was there any particular items causing the increase, or was it just generally across the board?
I'm going to say West Perth does quite well to only have 11% increase. A lot of municipalities around us have seen 15 to 20% increase in their premiums. So a lot of things that help bring your premiums down is following their risk mitigation kind of outlines. And so we're going to take a look at some of those going forward to see if we can maybe reduce those. Also depends on your deductible. I'm going to say with the amount of insurance carriers in Ontario, West Perth does quite well with only 11% increase.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions for Wendy on the insurance? Seeing none, I'll read the recommendation that the Council of the Municipality of West Perth accept the 2024 supplementary change for insurance as information, and that council be advised of an increase of insurance premium in the amount of $48,920 from $444,725 in 2023 to $493,645 in 2024. Councillor Rose, you'll move. Seconder, Councillor Phelps. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. Those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you. Section 410, 2024 debt obligation is our next topic.
So the report before you breaks down all of our debt that we have, and also in the report it explains how we can calculate our debt repayment. So our debt capacity is $3.9 million, and we're using $520,000 of it, so quite low. We don't carry a lot of debt. We do have 6 active loans, being the pump station, the water tower, streetlights, the fire hall, the Henry Street Bridge, and the fire truck, all with different terms. 2 are completing in 2024, being the streetlights and the water tower, I believe. Yes. So we should see a reduction next year for our cash requirement for debt. It's the same as last year. So there's no change in debt payment for principal and interest, just a shift in how much interest we're paying to principal. If there's any questions on that report, I'll take them.
Any questions? Counselor Fournier, go ahead.
Again, just a simple question. On your Devonshire report, the fire tanker 96 seems to have been purchased in 1900. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, that's just a formula blip in Excel. It was taken out in November of 2022 as a 5-year term, so it'll mature in 27.
Any further questions? Yeah, these horses eat fuel, not hay, so that's a good thing. So, all right, although the fuel costs have been high lately, but Wendy's happily reported the fuel costs are starting to ease their way down, so they're. So, debt obligation, the recommendation is that the Council of the Municipality of West Perth receive the 2024 debt obligation information report. Mover, please. Councillor Chessel, seconder. Councillor Fournier, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. Those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. All right, so our last item is 4.11, 2024 budget impacts.
So in this report, we talk about what 1% levy increase is, and this year it's $101,744.40. So every percent increase equals that much additional revenue. So a couple things that we saw and changed in this year is a big change in the materials and supplies accounts and the maintenance accounts. In review, we saw there was a lot of capital being posted here, so they've been reduced, and you will see them show up at capital. And so we've created accounts called furniture and equipment, and they'll be kind of pooled purchases, and then other items that would be higher value will be identified in their capital plan. And then we definitely saw a difference in the fuel. So we've reduced the overall corporate budget by $47,378. Definitely seeing a reduction at the fuel pump. I'm sure everybody else is too. So we wanted to reflect that in this budget year. One other change that we've put in place this year is budgeting for the phased in DC. So in this number, we've took a look at the historical information and applied that, and then applied the difference between the full DC rate and the phase-in rate. And so from that, we come up with $18,795. So that's an additional expense on the budget this year. With a new DC study coming, and the phase-in is prescribed, so it will soften the expense requirement for next year. So looking at the slide, could we put up the PowerPoint again, and the second slide or third slide? One up. That one. So I'm just going to review this slide again. Essentially, this is what we've kind of run through. So our total expenses in 2024 is 17.6 million, and last year we were at 16.8 million. So the difference is 768,599, and that number is supported by all the supplementary changes on the screen there. So salary and wages at 785,000, OPP change, library change, conservation authority change, insurance, increase in OMPF, increase in assessment, the decrease in fuel, and then we have other, which is essentially across all departments, an increase of $79,705. So I think this slide kind of buttons down the operations as being fairly close to what it was last year. With all the supplementary changes, very little was changed elsewhere. If there's any questions, we'll take them. That's pretty much your operating budget for 2024. So
Any-
with the, sorry. I was gonna say with the change in the OMPF, it's gonna change that number by 100,000. So in the budget analysis here, it talks about, so currently in the reports, so in the FMW reports you have in front of you, the number on the bottom shows $675,738 being contributed to capital. So now we'll just have an extra 100,000 currently until we go through capital and then revisit that OMPF strategy again. So last year we had 752,000 contributed to capital. So by adding that 100, it's a little more. Subtracting the 100 is a little less. And so we're still working on capital. We do have the 10-year capital plan, and I think it shows some highs and lows, and we'll be bringing that forward in January. So if there's any questions on operating, we're here to help answer some of those questions.
Yep, thanks, Wendy. Any discussion or questions from counselors? No, seeing, oh, Councilor Fournier, go ahead.
Again, just a simple one through your worship. It looks to me like on our current consolidated year budget, it says that the, where are we here? The budget for paying us, 183,168. But earlier in the document, it says that every 100,000 is 1% of the budget levy, but then council shows up as doing 3% of our expenses on a different form. Oh, 3% of wages total, not 3% of expenses total. Thank you. That explains that issue.
Anything further? Going once, going twice, okay. If there's nothing further, then the recommendation for the 2024 budget impacts reads that the council of the municipality of West Perth receive the 2024 budget impacts information report. Moved by Councillor Phelps, second by Councillor O'Donnell. Any further discussion? If not, I'll call the vote. Those in favor? Opposed, if any? None. That's carried. Okay, thank you. So that concludes section 4 of our meeting agenda. Thanks to councillors and for your questions, very good questions, and for your attention. And thanks to our staff for the tremendous amount of work to put this report together and present it to us in a very concise and simplified fashion. It's always appreciated when things can be boiled down to their simplest common denominator. So thanks again. We're blessed to have a staff that's truly dedicated to the task of the community. So without any further delay, I'll turn the meeting proceedings back over to Mayor McKenzie.
Okay, thanks, Dean. Just a few little items left to finish for the meeting. Announcements, we will be meeting next week on the 18th for a regular council meeting. That'll be our last regular council meeting of the year. We do have one on the 21st, but that's a budget, right? Do we have, am I right on that one? No.
Mr. Mayor, the next slated budget meeting was we were looking for January 15th.
Okay, so the 21st is open. Okay, so the 18th will be our last council meeting of the year. So traditionally what we've done at the year end is gone around the table and any comments of the past year, positive or negative. If you want to make a comment, there'll be an opportunity towards the end of the meeting for that. I'm just giving you a heads up if you want to think about that for the next week. We don't have any closed session, I don't believe. Oh, yes. So coming up tomorrow is the luncheon over at the community center. And on the 19th, there is an open house for Mike. And dress is not semi-formal, is it, Mike? Very casual. I very casual. So on the 19th, 2 to 4. And that's at the community center as well. So hopefully everybody can schedule that into your calendars for that to happen. I don't have anything else, I don't think, at this time. Somebody else has anything else they want to bring up? The coffee with council, I think we gained momentum as we went along, and I think from all reports, the one that was at Tim Hortons last Friday was fairly well received. I don't think a lot of negative comments, positive comments, and a few suggestions. And I think Tim Hortons thought that we had brought people in there, and I think we thought that maybe they had brought people in for us too. So it was kind of a win-win. But it certainly was a busy morning. A lot of traffic in and out of there, and I think it was. I would think you would call it a successful venture. I think Mel was pleased with the results of that day. Okay, the second last item that we have here is a confirmation bylaw, and it's bylaw number 70. Being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of Corporation of the Municipality of West Perth, we read a first and second time this 11th day of December. We have a mover and seconder for that, Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Harold. All those in favor, opposed, if any, that's carried. And that bylaw number 70, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of Corporation of the Municipality of West Perth, we read a third time and finally passed this 11th day of December. We're moving seconded to that. Councillor O'Donnell, seconded by Councillor Duck. All those in favor, opposed, if any, that's carried. And final, we adjourn at 8:56 p.m. So moved by Councillor Rose, seconded by Councillor Phelps. Just before, well, we can adjourn. I was going to ask Doug if he had anything you want to say about the homecoming before we wrapped up here tonight.
I was going to save it for the last meeting, but
Oh, you can get in too.
the planning's coming well. Our committee grows a little bit, and we're getting ready for the pre-New Year's dance, which is half sold out. The cash calendars, the Legion are sponsored, we're at about 60% sold. What else? The mayor's levy we got coming up, and it's planned, and I think Walter will be pleasantly surprised. We keep him at bay a little bit this one, and but I think it'll be a good event, and I hope people come out. And again, we're hoping there'll be council and members there that it'll be a good afternoon to meet with the generational families of West Perth and celebrate 150 years of agriculture in the community. So,
thanks. Okay, I think we had a mover and seconder to adjourn, and it's now 8:58, so we're still before 9 o'clock. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. So we're adjourned. Thank you.